All right. So I saw the TV Glow spoiler discussion. Here's two people who just saw it and are trying to analyze and interpret it without any notes, having only seen it once, and it being this insanely complicated film.
Very complex.
So we'll do our best. So bear with us.
First of all, we are the pink opaque.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind.
Yeah. Our TV is literally glowing right now.
It's pink and opaque.
Yeah. I mean, hey, the word opaque means like hard or impossible to understand. So
to see through, right?
Well, that's the other definition of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
I didn't even think of that actually. That's cool.
So yeah. I mean, that is very very true to form on this one, because this one it's complicated, but you know, I don't think it's impossible, because I think whatever the director may have intended, that doesn't mean that's it, right? A lot of people like to take films like this and they want a very specific meaning. They want to sit down and they want to say, okay, what did this mean? Mm-hmm. And in some instances that might be the case. But for the most part, with films like this that are super interpretive, it's just going to depend. Like we had said in the spoiler-free discussion, it's a Rorschach test. It's all about what you see is how it connected with you. Yeah. Right? And if you don't see anything, then it just didn't connect with you. And that's the, like, you just didn't get it.
Right.
Right? It's like you didn't connect with it. So I think that's what people probably should say instead, is you didn't like this movie because you didn't connect with it. Right? That seems a little less condescending
and judgmental.
Yeah. So that's what I would say for this movie. And so if you're looking for a definitive answer on what this film meant, then you're looking at the film incorrectly, in my opinion. You know, you could go get the interpretation from the writer-director herself.
Sure.
And that interpretation you could, I guess, take as, you know, that's the right interpretation to have. Yeah. But I don't think films like this are meant to have a right interpretation. They're meant to be left open enough for you to sit back and say, here's how I felt.
I totally agree. I think that because this movie has so many different interpretations to it, that it would be very limiting to sit down and say, this is the correct way to look at it and this is the only way to look at it. Because, as I said in our spoiler-free discussion, I think that it's both a very personal film to the director and their connection to the story and what they wanted to convey, as well as being a very universal, universally, like, relatable film, because I think that you can go into it from a lot of different perspectives and find meaning in it, which is fantastic. I love when movies are able to be viewed that way.
Yeah, Jane Schoenbrunn, Jane Schoenbrunn. That's a tough name. I mean, she definitely has, I think, a specific interpretation that she herself has. But once again, I just don't think that needs to be the focus, right? I think a lot of people would want to go to her and be like, explain this to me. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like you're missing the point.
Yeah.
So now, what did this movie mean to me personally? And I think, you know, when you're looking for a explained or explanation video on YouTube, explain it to me. Okay, I'll explain what it meant to me.
Yeah.
How about that? And Kaylee can do the same. So, as a kid, I grew up in a household that was not so kind to me. And the one thing that I had to connect to, the one thing that I loved, the one thing that truly kept me going was my TV set. And there were shows like Are You Afraid of the Dark? Which is why I put on this shirt, because this show definitely invokes nostalgia and your connection to nostalgia as a child and how much that means to you. And to some people it meant nothing. You know, some people grew up in the 90s and their nostalgia for what they have doesn't connect on a level like it does to people like me, who it was their life, right? The closest movie I ever saw that connected to me on that way, or in that way, was the movie The Cable Guy with Jim Carrey, which of course then makes me look like a psychopath because he's kind of a nutcase in that. But he only had television. It was his babysitter, it was his parent, it was his friend, it was what he had. And I didn't really make friends until high school. Right? And that's for a multitude of different reasons. We don't need to get into that here, but I definitely felt different. I felt isolated. I felt disconnected. And what I felt connected to and what I could feel connected through was my affinity, my love, my commitment to television, to movies. And of course, I've retained that love, right? This isn't a nostalgia. This is a way of life for me. So it never went away, you know, and I think that's true here too, as to where this is, he says, The Pink Opaque is my favorite show and it will always be my favorite show. So it's not like something he forgot, right? So like the show, the show that reminds me of The Pink Opaque, or this movie in general, should I say, is Channel Zero, season 1, you know, Candle Cove.
Yeah.
Because it's a bunch of kids who are remembering this old show on television that drew them in and they connected with it. Now that goes much more of a horror route, and this is more of an exploration of, you know, who we are inside. But for me, it was about your deep connection to this, to escape what was unappealing to your life. Like my stepfather and my mother, like I didn't want to be there. And the people on the TV felt like my friends. They felt like my family. I felt like I was in it. It's like she says, you know, sometimes The Pink Opaque feels more than just a show. It feels real. Yeah. And it's like, that's true. Mulder and Scully, I was on those cases with them. Right? And that might sound pathetic to some people. And that's the kind of people I feel like aren't going to connect with this. This is for the loner kids who grew up watching TV and saw it like a religion, saw it like a way of life, really felt like that was them, that we were seeing something that was that felt more real than real. Because here's the thing. When you grow up like that, and even to this day, in some ways, life is cruel, right? Sometimes it can be wonderful. I mean, I met Kaylee and she's wonderful, and I'm so thankful to be married to her. You know, it took a lot of trial and error and a lot of bad relationships. And I had my girls and they're wonderful, you know. But life can also be very cruel. And unfortunately, most of my childhood was cruel. And the TV shows, while they're dramatic and there's crazy things going on, there always seemed to be, it always seemed to make sense, right? And with the real world, I always have a really hard time. I'm very into politics now, and I'm always screaming at Kaylee that nothing ever makes any sense. And she has to deal with it. God bless her for sitting through my rants about how nothing ever makes sense anymore. But the world doesn't feel real at times. Yeah. And something about television shows and movies and stuff that you connect to, that world feels right. Yeah. It feels like it makes sense. You're like, why am I not there? Right. That's the world. Like, I feel like I'm an alien. I feel like this isn't my planet. Yeah. Right? And when he does, like, when they're embracing the show, when they're a part of the show, that's when he has the most passion, the most excitement for life. He's, you know, she asks him, are you into girls? And he's like, I think I'm into TV shows. He's in love with the television. It's not about it's not about sexuality. It's about his connection. It's about what he loves. And he gets that love through Maddie. Maddie is like a conduit for what brings him and has that connection to something that feels more real than real. And so when that show is canceled, because we all have experienced that, our favorite show's taken off the air, that's now, that's the end of an era. And you have to move on. It's time to grow up. Your shows are over. It's time to be an adult. And you're still stuck in the past because you don't want to move on. Because adult life is scary. Because you don't feel like you want to leave that area. You weren't given enough proper tools to get through this life because his mother dies and because his father's an asshole. He just wants to live in that world and it's over and he doesn't want to move on. And there's so many more things, right? Like when as soon as the show ends, she ends. Right. She dies or she moves away, she runs away, whatever it is. And, he's never fully... Now, does he seem like he changes all that much throughout? Not really, but his connection to the show is where we really see his passion lie, right? That's when he's excited about things. And when he's moved on from the show and he's decided to grow up, to not be who he was supposed to be, to go with Maddie, to bury themselves, to be part of the show again. He then goes off and becomes an old man. And when he goes and tries to look at the show again, it's changed for him because he's grown up. He's like Peter Pan or something. It's like, or in Hook, I guess. You've grown up, Peter. Like, you don't remember Neverland anymore. And when you look back on the shows from the past, you're like, God, this used to be scary. God, I remember the show being so different, right? So there's so many things to take. I literally could take every single scene and tell you how I feel like it could connect to the story.
Yeah.
But that's my own personal experience with it. Just watching it is just that absolute love and connection to nostalgia through your childhood and not wanting to move on. And then there's the whole season 6 thing and Maddie coming back, and there's so many things to interpret there. But that's my connection to it. So what about you?
I definitely related to a lot of the things that you were saying about, your childhood and real life not making sense as much as it made sense in TV shows or movies. For me, this movie is a lot about how the media that we consume shapes our identity and how we embody ourselves in the world. I thought that Owen presented very much like an autistic person to me, which was something that I heavily related to. And I really connected with this idea that, when I was younger, I had shows that I would watch all the time and movies that I wanted to live inside, partly for escapism, to escape abuse that was happening at home and all of that, but also because I wanted to fit in somewhere and I would find characters that I was like, that's who I want to be. Yeah. That's how I want to be seen. And even to this day, when I find some character that I love, I either want to buy a t-shirt with them on it or subtly cosplay as the character so that even if nobody else makes the connection of oh, you look like so-and-so, or is that a reference to whatever, I know that it's a reference, and it makes me feel more comfortable in my skin to kind of have this it's a mask in a way of just, I can pretend like I'm this character and it helps me talk to people or get through my day. And so I think that, obviously this film could be interpreted in so many ways. So you could look at it very literally as Owen and Maddie are for sure Isabel and Tara from the Pink Opaque. Or they're, people that are hurt and wounded and making that connection to those characters, and that's who they would rather be. And Maddie, goes kind of too far with it and is I am this person, whereas Owen is maybe holding back. We talked about too, I think off camera, how the director is trans, so a lot of this film is also about not being what a life would look like if you don't
If you're never true to
yourself.
yourself.
If you're not your true version of yourself. And that's something that obviously I think will hit very close to home for trans people, but also for anybody that's had to hide aspects of themselves, which is why, like, definitely the connection that I made with Owen being autistic was something that I was like, oh, that's like so relatable for me. But I think that it goes for a variety of like lifestyles and personality types, and just anyone who has not fit in, you know, in the world or been rejected by the world, I think will find that connection like readily available to them in this movie. So I guess that's like my general interpretation, but this is also a film that I am so excited to go back and rewatch, because I think that it'll have like generally the same impact on me, but I really feel like I will be able to pull a different meaning from it at different times and different watches, you know? And I find that to be so beautiful and like inspiring in a movie. As you were talking too, I was also kind of thinking about how this movie, like, so how can I say this? Owen kind of being so like his passion and the time when he is like the most alive is when he is watching in like it, like in the pink opaque.
Yeah.
But it feels different than, for example, the feeling you get when you watch Videodrome, which is like the media you consume is going to destroy you. You know what I mean? That's like very broad for that movie too. Like there's a lot of other things, but with this one, it felt like the thing that he should have been pursuing was the pink opaque, because that's where his joy was. It's where he was happiest, which obviously as a metaphor for being yourself, right? Like that's what you should pursue. The things that make you happy is what you should go after and what you should, you know, strive to present as much as possible. But, you know, a lot of people don't have the safety to do that necessarily, depending on, you know, their family and the people in their lives and everything. And that's really sad that we still live in a world that people can't be themselves 100%. I think we're getting closer, but it's not 100%, you know, there yet. So yeah, I just thought that was kind of interesting. This didn't feel like like a lot of movies, especially horror movies. And there is horror in this, but the horror is, for me, not from the television and not from like how obsessed they are with the show. But a lot of horror films and just movies in general will try to paint like, if you watch too much TV, like there's something wrong with you. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's the horror, is like that can control your mind or like destroy you in some way. And there's something to be said about that too. Like it's not, obviously it's a topic that interests a lot of people and that, you know, maybe should be talked about. But I think it's rare that we get something like this, where it's very, like I said before, it's like a love letter to like these nostalgic shows that we grew up on. And I think that's really cool.
Well, people don't understand how much they mean to us.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And they always look at it as like you're some weirdo loser. And it's like, really? You connect with stuff like that on that level? Like, how lame. And it's like, we all, not all of us, but a lot of us can do that, right? Like the football star who peaked in high school and then he never went off to the pros. He sits at the house and he watches NFL games every day and college games every day because he wants to relive his glory days. It's the same shit. It's about what you're connected to, and there's a nostalgia to it, and there's a fantasy to it, and you know, and I think that, you know, some people are very fulfilled and have these kind of wonderfully perfect lives, but we're not all so lucky. And you don't even have to have drama or some negative childhood to experience what we're talking about, for sure. But I think that this film has so much meaning to it in so many different ways, whether or not, you know, because it really kind of has a lot for so many different types of people, whether you're trans or whether you had an abusive childhood or whether you had a parent die, or whether or not you know, were gay or asexual or autistic or, you know, you were super into movies, or if you, you know, were very confused about your sexuality in general, or because there's a lot of things in here from like where Owen comes out wearing a dress. And I had talked about how maybe he was trying to appeal to Maddie, or Maddie was like trying to make him appealing to her because he's the only one that she connects with. But that's the thing. They don't really ever truly connect. It's like the show keeps them together. But much like the Pink Opaque, our main characters here, they never really hang out much.
Yeah.
Right? She's like, they don't, they're like these psychically linked characters that are communicating from across the county, much like the show Sense8, also made by a trans person. But this connection across, and this is kind of how it is. She's delivering the VHS tapes to him, and they go to VHS, high school.
Yeah, I loved that. Void
High school.
So cool.
And so they don't ever really get together, right? She leaves him the tapes, and he watches them, and he obsesses over them. And it's like the first time they hang out is like the first episode. Then they don't hang out again. And then when they hang out again, it's like towards the end, and it's like the finale. And then as soon as the show's over, you could interpret it as Maddie was killed. Maddie was killed by her father, because there's the police tape up when he goes there, and the cops are in front of the house. And then there's the scene where Owen sticks his head through the television, and the dad pulls him out. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he really just killed himself as soon as the show ended, and they're both dead, and they're both in the afterlife together, and one of them has decided their afterlife or their limbo is going to be inside the show that they both love.
Yeah.
And the other one is like trying to run from it.
Yeah.
And Maddie's trying to pull him back to what, where he's supposed to be.
Yeah. The scene where Owen sticks his head in the television, I thought that was a really scary scene when his dad pulls him out and he's like, "You're not my father. Like, I don't belong here." I thought it's heartbreaking, and it's also like really terrifying, and also just very visually stunning. And there's a lot of shots like that in this movie that are just like so striking because of the colors and like the saturation of the colors and this kind of blend of, VHS, like distortion, television kind of stuff. I love all of that. And I think that, I just thought that was really cool. Also, kind of as like not a segue, but like, I don't know how to segue into it. But one of the things that we have been talking about that we both loved is how the Pink Opaque is very clearly a reference to Buffy the Vampire Slayer. With the font being the same whenever they watch the Pink Opaque, like the credit font is the same as Buffy, and the
Monster of the Week.
The Monster of the Week, the double lunch where they have a band playing. Every episode is very much like the Bronze in Buffy, and I thought that was really cool because, that is one of those like iconic shows of the 90s that I think any kid growing up, would have seen maybe at least an episode or two of.
And let's not forget Jimmy's mom.
Right, and then Jimmy's mom is Tara.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was so cool. And like, yeah, so it's very clearly like Buffy.
I mean, it's kind of undeniable.
Yeah.
Because of the casting of Tara from Buffy the Vampire Slayer to just be in here for like 30 seconds. It's like they're in here because of a clear love and admiration, and the fact that Jane cast kind of the openly gay character of the 90s, where that kind of representation on what I would see as like a teenage show that's one of the first shows to do it, and that's the character that was gay that pulled Willow into her true self.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's kind of a nod to it. And also, the dad of Owen is played by Fred Durst from Limp Bizkit, which is also a very nostalgic band of the 90s. So it's just more nostalgia. I had no interest in Limp Bizkit personally, but I know that they are a very nostalgic band as well.
Yeah, the movie is very nostalgic for me. I kind of mentioned in our spoiler-free discussion because I wasn't a teenager in the 90s. Like, I was a kid in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And even just, like, the opening when we get young Owen and they're in the gymnasium and they have that big, like, parachute thing that you all, like, go inside. I don't know if you did that when you were in, like, elementary or middle school, but that was a really big part of, like, the late 90s, early 2000s. And I like have very vivid memories of doing that, and it was such a surreal, fun experience to have. So I love that that's in there, and how, you know, at my school it was like rainbow colors, but in this it's all of like the purples and pinks and blues that fit with the color palette of the movie, which it's just very satisfying. Like, looking at the film, like, I love the aesthetic so much. And it was like every shot had like a splattering of that like neon color thrown in, whether it's like the chalk or, you know, whatever. So I think that's really cool.
I had something to say.
I'm sorry.
Like 5 minutes ago.
Oh,
and
no.
I tried so hard to get you to stop because I was like, no, I'm going to forget it.
I'm sorry.
Fuck.
There's a lot to talk about. One thing I wanted to talk to you about, and that we talked about a little bit earlier, is like, so towards like, I mean, it's the whole movie, but I think it's really concentrated in like the third act of the movie, where Owen, like, there's so many things in Owen's life that are references to the Pink Opaque. So whenever he leaves his movie theater job and there's the downed power line with like the TV guide torn apart, whenever he's working in the Funland and all of the games are like references to Mr. Melancholy. They have like the Pink Opaque ghosts. And there was something else in that scene too. The
Marco Polo.
Yeah, Marco Polo. So do you think that Owen and Maddie are like that, they are the characters?
You know, it's possible that in order to cross into the Pink Opaque, you have to die.
Yeah.
And that Maddie is sending a message to Owen from the grave of like, touch this power line and you can be in season 6. Right? Like, it's giving him a way to kill himself. And when he doesn't do it, then she comes back to try. And when she comes back, remember, once again in Buffy, when Angel goes to hell, and he's down there for like thousands of years, but it's only been like, you know, a few months for Buffy, and he comes out and he's like barely knows who he is.
Yeah.
This is a similar thing that we have with Maddie, because she comes out and she's like, remember this show, The Pink Opaque? It's like, of course I remember it. Like, this wasn't even that long ago. This is the only reason I know you, is because this is the show we watched together. But it's like, it's like she's been away for a long time.
Actually.
Right? And so for her to come out of her, like, crawl out of the grave. Because she talks about how she was in there and she pissed and shit herself and she crawled out and she counted 10,000 and then she finally clawed her way out. I think she died.
Yeah.
Right? And then this is her clawing her way out to retrieve him so that she can get her partner to be, you know, her co-star in the Pink Opaque. I think the Pink Opaque for them is in the afterlife. And she's like presenting him with ways to kill himself. She tries to bury him. He tackles her. He rejects who he is. Yeah. And so he represses who he is.
Right.
Right? That's the trans thing. That's connecting to the character. When he cuts himself open, inside, he's still who he was. Mm-hmm. But then he closes himself back up and continues to keep living the lie.
Yeah, it's almost like it's too late.
And he's apologizing to everybody.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, because, like, he breaks away from what's expected of him. Right. He has a moment. Everyone freezes.
Yeah.
And he has that moment where he's just being himself, and, like, he's completely ignored. Like, time has stopped, and it's like, okay, like, this is who you are. And then he goes, and he has his moment in the bathroom, and he cuts himself open, and he's, like, remembering who he was, shuts himself back down, walks back out, and apologizes to everyone, like, I'm sorry you had to see me like that. who he actually is.
Right.
Right? And it's like, it's him completely repressing himself and going back to his miserable life.
Yeah, so a couple things. One, I really love that scene when everybody just freezes and kind of like powers down, because I think it's very uncanny, very unsettling. And he is being himself in that moment, but it's like he's crying for help specifically. Yeah. He's like, which is very much like if you're in a mental health crisis, a lot of people, like, if you don't have a good support group, people want to ignore that happening. Yeah. Like, they're like, nothing.
It's like you don't exist.
Right. So I think that's a really good metaphor for that. And it's very heartbreaking, him crying for his mom. And then, the apologies afterwards, like, sorry. But I really like what you said about the Angel and Buffy reference, but I think that you're slightly wrong on it, because she says, Maddie specifically says to him, it's like time moves differently here. It's moving too fast, but up there, it's seconds. Whereas when they're in the midnight realm, like, yes, it's moving fast for them, but it's years are passing. Like, so they're down there for years and years. Whereas when she's in the pink opaque, it's seconds. So I think that he is more like Angel trapped in hell, right?
So
like in the
being
midnight
like,
realm.
how long have I been gone?
Exactly. That's why she's like, do you remember this? Yeah. So, but I think that's, I really like, especially because it's related to Buffy, I think that's actually really apt. It's, I don't know. I think that you could definitely make an argument for, like, they are the characters. I mean, the fact that they're at the double lunch, which is in the pink opaque, and there's never, they never are like, oh yeah, like, there's this bar that's inspired by the pink opaque, like, everything that happens basically after Maddie leaves, like, all of that is definitely, that's the turning point of, like, as you were saying, did they both die? Did they both kill themselves when the show got canceled, or did Maddie get killed by her dad, or whatever? And, everything from that point on is like some type of afterlife, limbo, whatever situation, maybe. Because otherwise, like, I mean, if it's he's, that she just has this, like, insane connection to the show and is trying to get him to, like, kill himself with her, but they're not really the characters. I think it's really interesting that everything in his world around him is related to the pink opaque, especially because, like we said, when he goes to watch the show again, it's nothing like he remembers it, which in some ways it is kind of like, you had said when you go back and watch movies and shows from your childhood that, like, really freaked you out when you were a kid, and now you're an adult and you're like, why did I find that scary? Like, this is so cheesy. Part of it is, like, your perspective has changed. But you also don't have the connection to the show that you used to have. Right. Right? Which, again, with your, like, talk about how he's repressing himself, he wouldn't have that same connection. But it is wildly different. I mean, the characters are super young.
Totally different show.
The ice cream man, like, I love when the first episode that he watches, like, the ice cream man looks insane. Yeah. Which, again, is kind of like, when you're a kid and you watch something scary, your imagination does also help, right? But
you would never interpret what he watched as scary, right?
Yeah,
even like my kids at their very, very tiniest, and they're total wimps.
Definitely,
they would never find that scary.
No, definitely not.
So it's almost like they've altered the show by him not being in it.
Yeah, exactly, right. There's just a lot. I feel like there's so many. I think we could, like you'd said, go scene by scene with this show.
Yeah, we'd have to go back, this movie, rewatch it, take notes. But this is our first impressions interpretation of the movie. I would love to hear your guys's. There's plenty of other scenes. I'm sure you guys are going to bring up great points.
Yes.
And throw us some humdingers.
Yeah.
I'm very much looking forward to reading the comments. And seeing what other people's experiences were with this. I'm sure we're going to see a few things that we're going to be like, oh my God, like, when did we realize that? It'll be some cool stuff. And there will also be a couple, I'm sure, that'll be like, I meant to say that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But then I'll say that and they'll be like, yeah, right.
I think we should definitely, once we can rewatch it, take notes, and do, like, a really, like, in-depth spoiler discussion of it, mostly just because I really want to rewatch the movie. But I think it would be very fun to kind of comb through it, and just be like, oh, and then there's this connection, and then that connection. But
well, we need to hear from you guys.
But yes, let us know.
Would you be interested in us watching this again when it gets on demand or on Blu-ray and actually breaking this thing down scene by scene and how we now interpret it on our second viewing. If you guys are interested in that, let us know. And also, let us know what you thought about the movie, what your interpretations are, if you think that this is pretentious drivel, if you think we're total morons, that we didn't get it at all, whatever. Just, the comments help for the algorithm, so comment away. Mean ones, nice ones, they all do the same shit. But that ain't why I want the comments. Why I want the comments, because I actually unlike most YouTubers, we actually read the comments and we try to respond to most of them. Unless you're a total moron and whatever you wrote doesn't make any sense, I typically ignore those or completely destroy you and make fun of you and then put you on Instagram. So make sure you're making sense. As long as you can write a competent sentence or paragraph, you're not going to get that. But oh man, the shit I read, that needs interpretation.
Yeah.
So anyways, all right guys, we will see you in the comments.
Yeah.
And what a movie. All right.
Bye.